Welcome back to This Is How We Create. My name is Martine Severin, your host. Today we're talking about imposter syndrome and, this feeling of inadequacy that we sometimes feel about ourselves when we step into different spaces. Well, today we're going to talk about how you can harness imposter syndrome and maybe even redefine it. The story starts with there were six of us sitting in a conference table. So we're sitting there with my husband, Ola, Sandra, and Marcus, who is another employee. Sandra is amazing. I love her. And I send her random texts with things that I'm reading. But as we're sitting around there doing our year-end planning meeting, it's a 2-day meeting, right? This ends up being an exercise that has helped me redefine what I feel about imposter syndrome and whether or not I can use it as a tool. So Sandra says, we're going to go around in a circle, and I want each of you to tell the other person what you appreciate about them and one thing you'd like for them to stop doing. At this point, my stomach drops, not necessarily because I don't trust the folks in the room. In fact, I really trust them because I've been working with them for more than 5 years. And to boot, our coach, Sandra, is the bomb. And we've been meeting monthly for years. And with each of them, Sandra has helped us with project lunches and panic attacks. She helped us when we fired employees and book deals. So she's seen the worst, she's seen everything. When you're surrounded by strangers, your armor might stay up. But these people, for me in this room, they had seen my professional polish and they knew when I'd fumbled a client presentation, when I'd undercharged, and when I spent weeks avoiding one simple email because it just felt a little too big. But as we went around the circle, and I'm calculating. So Ola goes first and she tells Marcus she appreciates his strategic mind, but she wishes that he would stop apologizing before every idea. Marcus tells Ola he loves her creativity, but wants her to stop deflecting compliments. As my turn comes, my heart starts hammering like I've run up a steep hill without stopping. And a funny thing happens about not feeling like you belong, though, right? I should feel like I belong in this room. But that feeling of not feeling like you belong, it can happen in a room full of friends. It could happen with your family. And sometimes that feeling can bloom into the biggest spaces where people actually see you. It might bloom when they might name the thing that you've desperately been trying to hide, and not necessarily hiding from malice, but, from love. And to be clear, I think there are like 87% of creatives who feel like imposters. And for us as creatives, we're not sitting in a hostile boardroom. We go into good rooms, into supported rooms, rooms full of people who are cheering us on. And yet that voice, that whisper, they don't know about me. They don't really know. And if they really knew, oh goodness, we're going to come back to that silly, silly voice. When it was my turn to give feedback, Ola looks at me with tenderness in her brown eyes. And she says, Martine, I appreciate how you always make space for everyone, but I wish you would stop disclaiming your expertise before you share your ideas. Just tell us your brilliant ideas. Everyone in the room nods, and I look back at Ola and I thank her for her honesty. And the rest of the team murmurs their agreement. And inside my head, I thought, hot diggity, that is not what I thought she was going to say. I thought she was going to say how absolutely rubbish I am at my job, even though I know that I'm really good at my job. But it's just sometimes, that silly voice tells me foolish lies. And I reckon that silly voice tells you foolish lies as well. So we all know about Maya Angelou, who wrote 11 books. And she has been heard to say that she thought for a long time she was running a game on everyone. And here I am sitting in that room when I suddenly understood that maybe Maya wasn't afraid of being exposed as untalented. Maybe she was afraid of being seen as someone who believed in her own talent. I don't think we often talk about the fact that imposter syndrome isn't about feeling incompetent. Sometimes I think it's about the terror of being seen as someone who thinks that they are completely, absolutely competent. And that fear, they'll find out I'm bad at this. That fear may well be they'll think that I'm really good at this. And I think for women and for women of color and for anyone who's been told that their confidence is too much, that their voice is too loud, that they are intimidating. So, in the case when Sandra jumped in to help us go over our discussion, she says, "You know what's funny? Every single one of you had a version of this. You all make yourselves feel small before you shine." And boy, was she right. Marcus with his apologies, Ola deflecting compliments, and me with my disclaimers. So we all perform this elaborate dance of diminishment. And for me, as I was writing the script for this, I kept thinking, why do we do that? I think we do it because somewhere along the way, someone taught us that confidence was really dangerous and that taking up space was selfish and that believing in your own expertise was arrogance. Turns out that the psychologist Kevin Coakley found that imposter feelings, they affect women's performance, but not necessarily men's. Same feeling, different permissions to push through. Because when men feel doubt, the world says, take it. You can do it. You'll make it. And when women feel doubtful, the world says, well, you have to be realistic. She's being realistic. And that day in the conference room with Sandra, my imposter feelings, they faded because a spotlight had been shined on them. And now, don't get me wrong, imposter syndrome, for me at least, it shows up like an uninvited guest. And whenever I send an invoice or I submit a proposal, it shows up. But then I finally understood that imposter syndrome doesn't necessarily mean that I'm falling or I'm failing horribly as a human being. I'm cool with it. It's like, I feel like it's now like driving down a road where you change lanes because you know a few yards ahead, there's going to be this huge pothole. So you just avoid it. Or you can tell yourself, well, it shows up and it's just a feeling, and feelings aren't facts. But it may be that your grandmother had imposter feelings because she was never allowed to go to college, or your mother had these ideas, but she learned to phrase them as questions. Your father, who switched careers because people like us don't do this work. All of their unexpressed brilliance, and I know they swallowed their expertise. So I want you to be thinking about how to be wary about imposter syndrome and how it feels in your body. It might be a flinch when you are in a room where you are the expert. And when someone turns to you, it might be that feeling that makes you flinch. Just name it, feel it. It's a feeling and it's not fact. I'd love to wave a magic wand and say, well, now that I've told you this story, imposter syndrome doesn't exist anymore. But I think the question is there an antidote to imposter syndrome? Well, I don't know about it. The thing about imposter syndrome, I think it's about recognizing the difference between humility and hereditary shrinking, because there's a difference between being grounded and being groundless. And for me, I think that these days I catch myself when I don't want to lean into my expertise. And I ask myself, am I performing small? Am I being thoughtful? Or am I apologizing for having thoughts or for having an expertise? Because, my friend, the world needs what you're making, and the world needs your expertise without disclaimers, your ideas without any apologies, and your presence without thinking and shrinking. Let's not forget shrinking. So when you feel that imposter syndrome, just, one of the things that you could say is like, oh, this is telling me something. This is telling me that I feel fear. And when you feel the fear, go with it anyway, because when you go with it anyway, it makes you feel brave. And just remember, sometimes these things are a feeling, and feelings are not necessarily facts. So go ahead, get on with your bad self, be creative. And thank you so much for coming here and hearing me talk about imposter syndrome. I think about this a lot. And I have a lot more to say about it, but we only have so much time, my friend. So thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, I'll see you and have a great day. Stay creative. Hi there. If you're loving this show, would you mind taking a quick second to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite go-to podcast app? While you're at it, subscribe to our Substack newsletter, Creative Matters. You can find the link to subscribe in the show notes. All right, that's all that I have for you today. Bye.